Alright, so today I'm going to show you how to set in a sleeve that doesn't have any ease in it. Okay, so I think a lot of us are used to seeing sleeves like this. If we compare the two here, you'll notice that this sleeve here, the bicep, is much narrower than this bicep, which is much wider. And notice the sleeve cap here is much higher. Alright, much longer or higher compared to this one, which is much lower. Okay, there's a lot less distance on this one from the bicep to the top of the sleeve cap, where this one has a lot more distance from the bicep to the top of the sleeve cap. Okay, this sleeve has ease in it. It has about an inch and a quarter. Okay, this sleeve cap has little to no ease in it, maybe about a quarter of an inch at most. Okay. Another thing you'll notice, this is the armhole. Okay, here's the armhole, the front and back armhole that this sleeve would sew into. Okay, this is a much smaller armhole if we compare it to the armhole that this sleeve would sew into. So if I pull this out, okay, you'll notice that this armhole is much bigger. Okay, so basically there's a lot more room in this armhole and in this bicep, where this sleeve is actually larger. Okay, so it doesn't need the ease in the cap. Okay, it's not a fitted sleeve. All right, this sleeve here is a fitted sleeve. Okay, so it has a smaller armhole and a much longer sleeve cap and a narrower bicep. Okay, so today what we're going to do is, we've set in a lot of sleeves like this. I'm going to show you how to sew this sleeve in. Okay, so again, this sleeve you might see on some jackets, men's button-up shirts, also in using stretch fabric, you would probably have a sleeve like this. Okay, again, there's no ease in it, or there's very little ease into it, so you sew this in much differently. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so here I've cut out our front torso panels, our back torso, and a sleeve. Okay, and this again is the larger sleeve. It has a smaller sleeve cap, larger bicep, there's no ease in this, and larger armholes on the torso. Okay, so the way you sew this in is, what we'll do is I'll sew our shoulder seam closed. Then once that's closed, we'll sew the sleeve cap into the armhole, and then we'll just sew right up side seam and then down the underarm seam. Sew it in. It's actually very simple. It's much easier than setting in the sleeve. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing we're going to do is sew our shoulder seam. All right, I'm just going to do one half of this pattern. I'm not going to do the whole thing. Okay, so I'll just do one half here, because both sides are exactly the same. So I'm taking, this is my back, I'm going to take my front, and I'm going to put shoulder seams together, right sides together, and I'm going to go ahead and sew this at a 1/2 inch. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, we're at the sewing machine. Here's my shoulder seam. I'm going to go ahead and sew that at a 1/2 inch. There we go. Okay, so the shoulder seam has been sewn shut. Let's go ahead and press this seam at the shoulder open. Okay, so let's go ahead and press our shoulder seam open. So. Alright, so now we've pressed the shoulder seam open. Here is the right side of the garment. Okay. Alright, so here's our sleeve, and here's the cap of the sleeve. We can now go ahead and sew it into the armhole. So you'll notice I have my back directional notches, 1, 2, which match up with the back armhole, and then my front directional notch right here. We have our ease notches, and then this is the center that lines up with our shoulder seam. So let's go ahead and take the right side of this and line it up with the armhole. And we'll just put a pin in right in there. And then I'm going to come right down to my side seam. Alright, and this is in the front. I'm going to bring the front underarm seam, or the front, to the side seam. And I'll just pin that together. Okay. And then I'll just pin up to my directional notch. They should match. And we'll pin that in. Okay. Now here we are sewing two opposite curves together. Okay. So I'm not really going to pin anymore in between that directional notch and the shoulder. Okay. Because I want to work this as I go. All right. Now there might be a little bit of ease in my cap, but I should be able to just ease that in with the feed dogs, because there is very little in there. All right, and I'll do the same thing back here. Okay, so I'm going to bring my underarm seam of my sleeve to side seam and pin the two together. Bring it up my directional notches and pin that together. Okay. And then when I go to sew this, I'm going to put the sleeve cap down against my feed dogs. Okay. Again, there shouldn't be any ease in here, or there should be very, very little ease. So we shouldn't have any issues sewing that in. Okay. So let's go to the sewing machine and sew this in. All right, here we are. We're going to start right here. Again, I have the sleeve side against my feed dogs, because those will ease that right in. And let's go ahead and start stitching. Again, you're sewing two opposite curves to each other, so you're going to have to stitch and adjust, stitch and adjust. You know, stitch for half an inch, whatever you think it needs to get it in there. Okay, we're coming up the shoulder seam. So there it is, stitched in. This is the sleeve side. Okay, you can see I had a little bit of ease in here, but the feed dogs eased that right in, no problem. Okay. And then this is the side of the shirt, or the garment. Okay, so let's go back to the cutting table real quick. Alright, here we are. You can see what it looks like now. This is the inside of the garment. Okay, so again, here's our neckline. This is center front. There's center back. Here's our shoulder. And then we have our sleeve and armhole. So our sleeve cap, which is now sewn into the armhole. And then here's the underarm of the sleeve. And this is side seam of sleeve. Okay, so now what we have to do is sew up our underarm and our side seam. So what we're going to do is, let's flip this around to the right side. Okay, so we're going to start here at our sleeve hem, and we're going to fold over right sides together, like so. And let's go ahead and put a pin in right here at the hem of the sleeve. And let's work up to our elbow. Here's our elbow notch. Let's go ahead and put a pin in there. And keep coming down to underarm. Okay, here's my underarm. Again, depending on the seam finish you're doing here and everything, there's lots of ways to finish this. We're just sewing a simple muslin. I'm just going to have, so my seam allowance, I'm not going to press it open. I'm just going to have my seam allowance folded in towards my sleeve. Okay, so both seam allowances I'm pushing in towards the sleeve. Put a pin in right there, underarm. And now we're going down our side seam of the shirt. There's waist, and then down to the hem. Okay, so that's what that looks like now, all pinned up. Okay, so here's the sleeve, the hem of the sleeve, go up the underarm seam, here's armhole, and then down side seam. Okay, so let's go ahead to the machine and stitch this in. Alright, we're back at the machine. This is the hem of my garment, okay, and this is side seam, so we're going to sew right up side seam. Stitch it at a 1/2 inch, back tack beginning and end. And again, this is pretty easy. You're basically just sewing a straight line from the hem of your garment all the way to the hem of the sleeve. So basically, sewing in a sleeve doesn't get any easier than this. All right. Now again, this is not something you can do with a sleeve that has a lot of ease in it. Okay. Those you need to sew up the garment first, creating the full armhole, and sew up the sleeve, and then sew in the sleeve to the armhole. And there at the bottom, back tack that. And there we've sewn in the sleeve. Okay, so let's go back to the cutting table. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and press this seam open. So, take our sleeve board here, and then just put our sleeve through there. And there's our sleeve, underarm seam. Let's press that open. Okay, we'll flip this around and go up side seam. Okay. And now, so this is what it looks like on the inside. I'll bring this right side out. You can see what it looks like on the outside. Okay, so there's our underarm seam, sleeve to side seam, and there it is. Okay, so that's how you sew in a sleeve that doesn't have any ease. It's very simple. All right, good luck.